Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to February's Shop Talk. If you're listening, I would love for you guys to put something in the comments so that I know that you can hear me just fine. But again, welcome to this month's Shop Talk. We've got a lot of stuff on the schedule today, so I want to go ahead and jump into it. If you haven't joined us before, Shop Talk is the industry's, the student housing industry's webinar that we do on a monthly basis. It's typically every second Thursday of the month. You can go back and look at all of our previous Shop Talk meetings, as well as if you want any information in the slide deck, it's there as well at shoptalk.info. Again, that's shoptalk.info. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. I'm also the CEO of Student Housing Insight. Student Housing Insight is a platform for creating content around the student housing industry, and also we are a professional network where student housing folks come together and share ideas and data. So you can find out more information at shoptalk.info, at studenthousinginsight.com if you want more information on that. Just a couple of house cleaning things before I bring Dave Borsos at the National Multi-Housing Council up to talk about policy and legislative updates. This is interactive. We want you guys to be able to chat with the audience and be able to ask questions to our panelists as well. So over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a chat bar there that you can put your chat in. And if you've got a question, I just ask that you put a Q in front of it. That will help me recognize it quickly as a question so we can get that to our panelists. Well, let's go ahead and bring Dave up. Dave, how's DC?
Every day is we wake up to something new and different. It's definitely a challenging time to stay on top of what is an ever-evolving landscape of any number of different topics. So
it is
give a little bit of insight in terms of things that we're watching and things that may impact the industry. But you know, every month it's going to be a bit different, we think.
Well, it's been November was the last one. It was the last Shop Talk that we had you on. We just, I think that was probably the week or the week after the election. So
yep.
It's been coming out as like a drinking out of a fire hydrant, as I've heard a lot of people say ever since then. So I'm sure you've got a lot to discuss. So let's get into it.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think everybody's probably hearing and listening. And if you watch the news at all, and I'm not taking one side versus the other, but there's just a lot of things that are underway right now here in Washington, D.C. I think there are a lot of changes that we're going to see. Comparison when we were under the prior Trump administration, then went to the Biden administration, it's always been a thing about deregulation, and for the Trump administration. And so I think we're going to see that same type of push with the new administration and across those agencies, which certainly can be a positive for us. So, there are certainly things that are afoot. We've been asked, just because we maintain relationships with congressional members and agencies, and we're getting asked, what should we do? What should we focus on? What are the things that are impacting the industry. And so those are things that we're certainly very focused on. So one of the things I think a lot of people have heard about are tariffs, and what does that really mean, and what kind of impacts can that have? First and foremost, one, tariffs exist today, not to the degree that we're probably seeing them being thrown around. Maybe they're being used a little bit more as kind of a negotiating tool, and whether we do or don't end up with tariffs, so certainly could have an impact on any number of different things. So whether you're purchasing items for your properties that get sourced from China, that certainly could have an impact. Whether you're building or constructing, and if you look at aluminum and steel that just had tariffs put on them on Monday, that could also raise the cost of new developments. And so that also has a downstream impact. There was certainly a pause put on Mexico and Canada, to our primary trade partners. But if you look at Canada, which supplies an awful lot of timber for construction, it's another thing that could have a negative impact on the overall housing industry and can ultimately raise the cost of delivering new product and for our students. So there's a lot of things that we're kind of keeping track on. The other aspect of it is government downsizing, and to give you an idea, one of the things that current administration has always been focused on is they don't like the Department of Education. However, student loans that come through the government all go through the Department of Education. So to the degree that there's a negative impact on there, that ultimately could have an impact on enrollment, et cetera. So there's some potential downstream impacts. And one of the other things that that Congress is working on right now is to figure out a way to extend the Tax Act, with a lot of the provisions expiring this year. And among the areas that they're looking at focusing on, the committee that is responsible for education is being asked to cut $350 billion out of their budget. And one of the things they're looking at are some of the student loan programs that the government sponsors and supports, like the PLUS program. So, we'll keep track of these. If you're a member of NMHC and sign up for our distribution of information, you'll certainly see a lot of this information as it starts to unfold. So going to taxes and something called reconciliation, one of the ways to pass legislation without having what used to be required of a larger majority of votes. Now it's just a simple majority, something called reconciliation. It's nothing more than a fancy term of how do you get across the finish line with something that you want to pass. Reconciliation comes with a very distinct and set rules that the members have to follow when they're going to try and use that process to pass legislation, which is their focus right now on trying to get this tax over the finish line. The one thing that is going to make it super difficult is that the House makeup right now is 218 Republicans and 215 Democrats, which means if 2 votes go from the Republicans to what would be a Democratic vote, it doesn't get passed. So it's razor thin. It's going to make some interesting negotiation, and it probably also has will likely extend how long this takes to get it done. What's the impact on student housing? Look, whether it's personal taxes, whether it's taxes on that impact the developers, et cetera, there are a number of downstream impacts that could have both a positive or a negative impact. So it remains to be seen what we come out with at the end. One of the other things that's been tossed around a lot and originally was part of the reconciliation package, but there are other that's not going to be part of the reconciliation because it simply just doesn't work, is how to get the enterprises, Fannie and Freddie, out of conservatorship. Rewind in time 16 years ago, they were put into conservatorship in 2008 with the idea, let's stabilize them and we'll get them out. 16 years later, we haven't gotten them out. So their current administration, there's a lot of ideas floating around, a lot of discussion. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do. The net outcome, if there is a move forward, is a concern by us in the industry. Does it have a negative impact on liquidity? Meaning, can you actually get a loan? Can you sell a loan? Can you buy a loan? And then two, can you actually get it at the same rate, or interest rates going to go up? It's something that I focus on a lot, and certainly something that's on the plate of members. But I do think this is something that gets pushed out till the following year. So speaking of deregulation, one of the early wins, and it happened very quickly, and a number of members of ours in the student housing industry expressed their concern to us, and that was when the FCC had proposed a rule regarding banning bulk billing. So this is something that was super important to the student housing industry, that would prevent you from being able to provide internet to one of your buildings on a bulk basis, and that your students would have the authority to be able to, and the right to go out and get their own individual one. So we thought it was a rule that was off base. We spent a lot of time with the FCC. They were moving forward with that. Big win. The FCC commissioner within the last week withdrew that rule. So huge win for everybody in the student housing industry. So it's something that we don't have to worry about. But again, kind of gives an idea of our advocacy and how that was worked very quickly in terms of some of that deregulation that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's big. I meant to create a celebration graphic for you, but
yeah,
ran out of
time. It's always nice to be able to deliver good news for the industry. And the last thing is, one of the things that my colleague and I, Matthew Berger, set out to do when we first started doing student housing a number of years ago, is we raised money through a research foundation that NMHC sponsors, and we have put out a number of publications over the years, and the latest one is coming up and about to be rolled out in the next couple of weeks. And we did a research paper on the impact of international students on kind of inbound to universities, and so look for that. That will be coming out and published within the next month. So with that, don't want to chew up too much time out of the hour, and I know you have other great panelists coming on, so I'm going to step off. And
I do have one quick question for you, Dave. I don't know if any of the members have asked you about it yet, but several operators have mentioned or just question, I guess, student visas and what to expect with that. There were a lot of universities at towards the end of the fall semester that told their international students, hey, get back before before inauguration day, because in the previous administration there were travel bans and some things that happened that had concerned them, and we didn't know where immigration policy was going to go. So now that we're looking at, obviously there's going to have to be a lot of steps for, DOE to be dismantled if that's something that moves forward. But are you hearing anything in regards to student visas being delayed for this next year?
So we haven't heard anything yet. If you think about it, so the administration was sworn in on the 20th. So we're only weeks into it. And then two, there's a total of 4,400 political appointments that require some form of Senate hearing or something of that nature. So we're early on in terms of getting some of them on board. So there have only been a handful of people to run a variety of agencies. So we'll see what happens. Like you said, in the last Trump administration, it certainly slowed it down, and given the focus on immigration, really kind of more border at the moment versus broadly with visas. Probably we should expect some similar movement forward in that particular space and may result. We haven't seen anything yet, but it's something that we're certainly monitoring. And then one last thing about dismantling, you can change the profile but you can't eliminate a department without an active commerce. Doesn't mean that they
Right.
won't do it, but and you can certainly undermine what the department does, but you actually cannot fully dismantle it.
Right. Well, Dave, I appreciate it. I'm not going to let you go without, first of all, welcoming Rich Kelly from Student Housing Business. We're going to talk a little bit about interface, but just really quick, Rich, any questions you have for Dave?
Well,
that we can do in the next 90 seconds.
I got a lot of questions for Dave. Hopefully Dave's going to be writing a column for the March-April issue of Student Housing Business, kind of spelling out some of this stuff for us. So I'll leave it to that.
All right.
All right, Dave. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. Well, Rich, good to see you. It's been a little bit. How are things?
Very good. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on, Wes. Yeah, no, busy time of year. Lots going on.
Well, today's a big day for you guys because it is let me change up my camera here. It's the deadline for the early bird discount for the big conference that you guys do each year, which is the Interface Student Housing Conference coming up in Austin on April 9th through 11th. So just wanted to bring you on and kind of remind everybody, hey, if you're going, today's the day to make sure you get that discount. And then also just to, find out from you how the plans are coming along, what are, if you got any important announcements, how are things going with the room block? Is that sold out yet? So give us an update.
Okay, will do. Yeah, as you said, early bird rate discount ends today. Good chance to save a couple $100 if you haven't registered already and you're planning on coming. The new registration rate goes into effect tomorrow morning, so do that today. Hotel rooms are still available but dwindling for Wednesday and Thursday nights. Tuesday night, for folks that are getting in a little earlier, unfortunately is full up at the JW. We do have a waiting list. But there's a group in ahead of us, which is unfortunately taken up a lot of those rooms. But, either get on our wait list or maybe just stay somewhere for the one night and then shoot over to the JW for Wednesday and Thursday. Exhibit hall, we have 3 exhibit booths left, so that's selling out quick. Attendance is looking great. We're running ahead of where we were last year. I think that's a sign of, just the interest in the space, right? The space is performing so well. A lot of more institutional, family office, international capital looking at the space, kicking tires, or maybe more than kicking tires. And now they really want to get involved. So they're going to be there in force. So overall, things are going great. We're going to have some interesting panels. We're actually going to have an international panel this year, focused on what's going on kind of in student housing around the world. We're going
Rich,
to
you froze up.
Oh,
hey, Rich, you froze for a second.
Okay.
Last thing we heard was you've got an international.
Yeah, so international, kind of what's going on, not just here in the States, but around the world and in Canada. We're going to look at tier 2 and 3 markets, certainly touch on AI and some different technologies coming down the pike. W Collective has a really interesting panel lined up as well. So we're going to have a great agenda.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for giving us an update. Again, reminder to everybody that the early bird deadline is today. And so make sure that if you're going, you take advantage of that. And Charlie, as I bring our pre-leasing panel on, any questions you have for Rich?
No, I wrote on my wall here, go to interface. If you were a fan of Around the Horn back in the day, a lot of people had it written on the wall, but that says go to interface.
Well, real estate people are very visual, Charlie, so that's good. We like that. That's a good message. That's good messaging. Thank you.
Yeah. And as far as I'll try to put a link in the chat, but you can go to studenthousingbusiness.com. You'll see a link there. You can also go to studenthousinginsight.com and to our events page, and we've got it listed there as well. So, Rich, thanks so much.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it.
Great. Charlie, how are things?
I know. Last comment on Rich. He rocks the sweater with the collared shirt underneath like no one else. So shout out to Rich there. I'm doing wonderful. I'm a little cold. It was 75 degrees last week, and now it's back in the high 40s. So, but other than that, we're doing great.
Well, we've got a fantastic panel today. I'll let you go through kind of introducing them as I get your slides ready, and we'll go through the updated numbers through the end of January, and then we'll get into some discussion.
Awesome. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, so Allison, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Charlie. I am Allison Schlarb. I am the SVP of Marketing over at Trinitas Ventures, and I will pass it over to Elena.
Hey, y'all. I'm Elena Jackson, and I am the Director of Sales and Marketing at Peak Made.
Awesome. Well, I will run through the updated stats. This is out of about 875,000 beds nationally. About 2.9% behind. I guess the loss leader there being the Southwest, about plus or minus about 5% behind. The Southeast, the largest from a standpoint of beds that we're tracking, about 2% behind in the Midwest, about 80 basis points. So, and you see a little bit more fluctuations in the Northeast and the West, just not as much of that inventory there to kind of move the numbers more consistently. But yeah, about 2.9% behind. If you think about that from the years prior, it's about even with 2020, I guess, back in 23 for AY, fall move-in of 23 versus 24 versus now, which is 25. So definitely a interesting time of the cycle. I'd say last year, maybe another month in, we saw a little bit more of a slowdown from some of the challenges related to, I know FAFSA was a thing last year, but ultimately, some markets, they're still rocking ahead. And then, some are definitely still seeing some of those headwinds from the previous year, whether that's the urban markets or, new supply coming in, et cetera. So
yeah, this time last year, we were 0.5% to 1%, depending on what week you're looking at, but still ahead year over year, which was a banner year before. Mm-hmm. So this really seems, I know we're going to be talking about, it seems like we're getting, back into kind of a normal pre-COVID mode with pre-leasing. So, but hey, I know that, there's other groups that are reporting some really big numbers.
Yeah. Assure you, not 7% ahead.
I can assure you, everybody I'm talking to, they're behind year over year. So.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think, there were some challenges in the Florida markets with the hurricanes for kind of a slower start there. And obviously the West Coast is kind of lagging from a time perspective. But generally speaking, there's specifically, if you think urban versus your traditional collegiate markets, I know that's one of the things we've highlighted in the past. You're still seeing some of that, that conventional supply boom still finding its way to absorb into the market. So I think I saw an article the other day where Austin was, had some of the largest numbers of supply on the conventional side and somewhere down, 5-10%. So generally speaking, it's a little bit different for some of those markets because you have that, that bucket where there's more options for students. So it's interesting right now because, ultimately perspective, it's kind of hovered around that 4.5 to 5%. Obviously, as mentioned, there's some markets where, the supply demand imbalance is so great that you're seeing a significant run up just based on the fact that there hadn't been anything delivered in 4 or 5 years. And a lot of your markets too that have lower rents per bed, if there's changes from a standpoint of, your traditional 3 to 5, whatever, sometimes it's $30, which is somewhat immaterial. In your larger markets with a higher cost of living, again, there's a little bit more even keel from that standpoint. So ultimately, the Midwest has continued to be, I would say, the leader in the pack as it relates to fundamentals. But the Southeast continues to stay relatively strong, even though they're behind about 2%, give or take, for there on the national level.
Charlie, when we were on our prelim call, I didn't think about, or I didn't really make the connection. But is this the first time, because we're now looking at the regional average rate per bed slide, and I see 1,001. Is this the first time nationally we've gone above 1,000 per room?
For the weighted average rate per bed, yes. Wow. And if you think, we've had, what's crazy, if you look at the timelines, and obviously, timelines matter, and this is a stat that is very indicative to kind of the supply demand imbalances that exist in a lot of these markets. But from 2014 to 2019, there's about 53,000 beds delivered annually. And over the last, if you include this year, there's been about a 30% drop over the last 5 years, again, aggregate across the board. We're roughly about 37,000, 38,000 beds have been delivered. This year is about 34, 35, which again, you've seen a run up at a lot of these large universities from an enrollment perspective. So again, you're seeing that play out here in a big way from just, again, general basic economics 101. And, as Dave mentioned, with some of the challenges that are kind of on the forefront as it relates to, costs of building and tariffs and everything in between, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 3, 4, 5 years as it relates to just new supply changing some of these fundamentals. So definitely bullish if you're leaning on the less, I guess on the more conservative side of what is going to happen on the development front. So and then from a floor plan perspective, from a national view, and again we'll share how this coincides and correlates on the rates front. But the 3 and 5 bedrooms, which 3 is definitely way more common than a 5 bedroom, more of your newer inventory or cottage product.
Sure.
You're seeing sub 3%, I guess sub 3% from a behind standpoint. And not a lot of 6 bedrooms in the space. Again, a lot of newer inventory there, only 2.7 behind. But those are your I guess winners as it relates to where demand is seeing. And if you go over and look at how this correlates on the rate side, again, from going from a 2 bedroom to a 3 bedroom, you're saving $180 on average monthly, which, if you annualize it, that's almost $2,000 back in the pockets, where again, very, very material to the guardians, the families, the students that are paying for these rents. And ultimately, again, you're seeing from the 5 bedrooms, we've debunked that, where those are the most common 5s and 6s and some of your larger unit types. Those are the most, I guess, the lowest renewed, just generally speaking, from commentary from a lot of different groups. But so you're seeing a lot more of those go into the market for their the new market rents, if you will. So high level, again, didn't want to make you do math. I switched these around so I didn't have to say that. But ultimately, strong across the board fundamentally, and as Rich mentioned, is why the interface attendance is continuing to rise. I think it's a great time to be in student housing.
Well, great. Well, I want to go into our panel. I don't know why this is not letting me remove the slide. There we go. Perfect. So I've got a question that, this was kind of the main question that was in my mind as we were looking through that, and, kind of to tee this question up a little bit for you guys. Like I said, the past 3 years, we've just seen banner year after year as far as velocity was concerned. Even last fall, we saw, year-over-year increases in velocity. Come about the end of February, that's when I started hearing from a lot of folks, and Charlie started seeing the data that, hey, something's slowing down. And, one of the key things that we were all asking is this FAFSA fiasco, which I'm not going to get into it. If you don't know what that is, go Google it. But, is the FAFSA delay, is that causing delays for us? And, I think by May, we knew that it was. And certainly, with, I think it was an extra $50 million that had been given to out from the DOE to other agencies to go out and try to help get people enrolled and through the paper process of applying. That ultimately caught up, and we saw that in July and in August, especially, and caught up. And we're right back to where we were the year prior. So as you guys are thinking about this within, certainly within your own portfolios, but from an industry standard as well, we're now halfway through February. We're behind year over year, but it could be more of a normal basis because this fall was not, we weren't blowing away the numbers from last year. What are you guys thinking? Let me pull up the question here. How are you guys thinking about the rest of the spring semester if we don't start seeing velocity pick up, say before spring break? Are you thinking things are going to get really aggressive? I want your opinion on that.
So So I'll jump in here, Wes. I mean, listen, nobody wants to go back through the spring plateau again. Never again. No. So I am thinking that we're as operators probably going to get aggressive. I think we'll continue to be intentional with our concession plans, intentional with our messaging to get renters to make decisions faster so they're leasing at a faster pace. But I mean, y'all, we cannot do that. We cannot have a brutal summer, not again. So I do think that all of us are on the same page when it comes to we just have to really be very crowded and get aggressive, like you said, Wes, because we don't want to see that again. I do agree with you that the trends that we are seeing happen today and how we're getting, we had the slowdown in fall and now we're starting to see things slowly pick back up. I'm optimistic about that continuing this spring and us getting the boost. So it's going to be a game of just continuing to really be aggressive and competitive with rates. And I mean, I actually feel good about it. Now I am knocking on my wooden desk. Like I said, I'm optimistic that our spring will be strong for sure.
Now, Allison, Trinitas has got, a smaller portfolio. You guys would probably be considered a merchant builder by a lot of standards. And how are you guys thinking about it?
Yeah, so a lot of the same. I think a lot of it is really going to be balancing being aggressive enough so we don't have that summer panic and that spring plateau because, nobody wants that again. But also, like, not being so aggressive and panicking when we know that the velocity is supposed to come. I think it's just one of those things where you really have to balance being aggressive and looking at the data that comes out, because the really unpredictable part about all of it is, like, what are the students going to do? Last year, I think that because of how aggressive it got in the summer, we usually always feel the pains of that the next leasing season. So, it's entirely possible that these students are just going to sit there and be like, well, no, I'm waiting for something more aggressive and we're going to have to do it. I don't think anyone's going to feel comfortable enough to say, okay, everyone, like, no one get aggressive. They'll come. I think we're all going to probably, hit panic mode come summer if it's June and we're still sitting with, a lot of velocity left to go.
Gotcha. Charlie, any questions from your end for these ladies?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've continued to see, and I mentioned this kind of in the beginning, is a lot of these more urban markets, right? Again, we'll categorize that as like a big city center. We'll call like an Austin, or we'll call Atlanta, my backyard. Definitely seeing, kind of macro level, some challenges there still. But also, if you look at kind of the flip side, there are some markets that are well behind that are your traditional college. So anything you can kind of glean from some of these markets, just kind of categorizing them at a high level. I know, Allison, you have a handful in kind of both buckets. Same thing, Elena on the Peak portfolio, but any comments related to that? Because that's one of the big things, especially as people are, digging into deals and looking at opportunities and, ultimately trying to understand the landscape of where's the opportunity, where's the supply demand imbalance, a big challenge, or are there things to think about that in years past you didn't really have to?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things that we haven't really had to consider a lot in years past are some of these markets that some of this conventional product is taking some of the student demographic, and we're seeing some of that conventional be included in some of that shadow market that's always just so difficult to track. With that new bit that we really need to consider and look at, I think a lot of the trends point to things looking a lot like pre-COVID, right? We're seeing a lot of trends that are pre-COVID. I think that if we look back at all of the data, some of the stuff looks really similar. We just kind of have to trust what that looks like. It's just, I don't think we have enough. I don't think we've had enough years with this conventional product being an unknown that is really capturing some of the students for it to help really determine and shape, like, what should we do with that? Does that change any of our, development strategies or site selection strategies? It really just is sort of an unknown in my eyes until we get, a little further down the road, unfortunately.
totally.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, Allison. And another really big thing is the market survey. I mean, how we approach getting to know each of these marketplaces and what's happening on a consistent basis. Shout out to you, Charlie, because you are big time helping us with that. But that has proven to be very difficult. So it's one of those things that we're just constantly having to get creative to make sure that we're very in tune with what's happening with our direct comp sets in each of these markets. And we didn't do that before.
No, that's such a good point, Elena, because I do think it's trending towards what we saw and dealt with pre-pandemic, as far as how that's going to continue to continue to progress. And I immediately want to go back and see, okay, can we look at those trend lines beforehand and see how that worked out? And compliments to you, Charlie, on how much of evolution College House has had over the past few years. But you guys came into the market, right into 2019, and really didn't get a lot of data until we started going through COVID, and all the operators were like, "Oh gosh, we got to have a way."
It brings back I don't know if you've seen the picture. It's like, why, a picture of a baby in 1992. Why didn't I buy Apple stock? Right. So
exactly. So it is one of those things. You look at the operators and how much consolidation there's been and everything else, and it's like, what do we actually go back to benchmark? So that's a very interesting point, Elena. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, and I'd say high level. I think in my 5 years of doing this, I think the big things that really drive things is like understanding what you're doing, and then seeing how that is benchmarked. You mentioned your comps and like how things are positioned. At the end of the day, it's back to the basics of execution. And I know, Allison, you mentioned like it's getting aggressive. Like that's following up, right? That's doing the right things that you might not have had to do previously because of COVID or technology, et cetera. So I see that as a big thing, a big trend moving forward. But ultimately, the biggest driver there is like if it's oversupplied, it's oversupplied, and you gotta make the decisions and put your property, put your your staff in a position to win. So definitely an interesting topic there.
Well, guys, I know this particular segment is not as long as our past couple of pre-leasing segments have been, but we've got a topic for this month that I want to get to, and jumping into finding out what's happening on the P3 side. So I'm going to get to that. Charlie, again, thanks so much for the data. Absolutely. And to Allison and Elena, thanks so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, let's start switching and moving a couple of people here. Jeremy, how are you?
Doing well, Wes. Thanks for having me today.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of news, when it comes to P3 recently, especially, the past 6 to 8 months. And it was this time last year, Jason and Jeremy, you guys were on for our P3 segment, something that we want to provide to our audience, each year to kind of find out what the pipeline's looking like, what kind of trends are happening. So we took February to do that. Appreciate you guys given your time. Had a fantastic prelim call the other day, so I'm excited to get into it. But yeah, here are some of the things that are in the headlines. We've got ACC doing a deal at Utah that's been announced. I think it was announced some time ago, but I think they recently broke ground on that. We've got Rhode Island, and I believe that was a deal with Gilbane, and then another grad project that is man, my eyes are getting bad at University of Maryland, and then also this one at University of South Carolina. I think I've got one more in here. Actually, that's a repeat. That's the same one in Maryland. But wanted to talk with you guys a little bit, about what's happened this past year, what things look like moving forward. But before I get into that, I want to make sure we've got proper introductions. So let's go ahead and I'll have you guys introduce you and your firms, and if you could tell us a little bit about some of the projects you guys have been working on this past year.
Sure. Jeremy Doss, Senior Vice President with Rise Real Estate. Been here right at 24 years now, and we've been doing P3s in some shape or fashion for going on 30 years. Back in 95, we came together. Since then, we're at about 60,000 beds, student beds. About 50,000 of those are on campus in a P3 fashion. Right now, front and center, obviously you all have seen and heard about the University of Tennessee P3. We got that closed, 2 phases of that for 3,000 beds, about 350 million in 24. We also are underway over at Jacksonville State, also known as Jack State, in Jacksonville, Alabama, with about a 700 bed, middle-classman, I guess, apartment and suite facility. Got some other things, exciting things cooking as well. We'll be closed here shortly at up at App State with an apartment project with the campus there, and some soon to be announced things. So exciting times.
Was the App State deal, was that the married housing or
no
housing or something?
I think that's underway and rocking along. This is actually a kind of upperclassmen
Gotcha.
apartments at the old high school site that the university had bought back in like 16 or 17. I think a lot in the industry may have seen that. It came out in the private, and we all looked at it. University ended up buying it. They've been parking on it ever since. It has athletics up there, softball and tennis, and now we are going to do 850 beds to kind of bookend that site.
Nice. Jason. Hey, Jason, you're on mute.
I apologize for that, Wes. I feel a little left out. I think I should have had a brick background today, but I'm in an airport lounge, so I don't think anyone wants to see the folks walking back and forth behind me. In any event, I'm Jason Taylor, managing partner at the Annex Group. Annex is an impact housing developer, builder, owner, operator. We deliver student workforce and affordable housing. I've got about 6,000 units in 18 states across the country, among all of those asset classes. On the P3 side, we really work in higher education, K through 12 school districts, medical centers, as well as with research parks. And in higher ed, right now, we have just broke ground recently on a 542 bed residence hall at University of Memphis, right there in the great state of Tennessee that Jeremy mentioned earlier. We'll be delivering that next summer.
Great. Lindsay.
Hello, Lindsay Stoll. I'm a managing director with Reith Jones Advisors. We are a specialized consulting firm focused on higher education. We work on a lot of student housing. We've advised over 200 institutions collectively here at RJA. And we've got a lot of student housing P3s in the portfolio. So I think the biggest one right now, I think a lot of people are aware of, is the University of Florida. We've just launched a solicitation for a development partner there for a very large project. We've got several other projects that are in various stages, including University of Alabama, Huntsville, which has a mixed-use project but has a student housing component. We've selected a development partner there, and a couple of really great closed projects that are under construction at the moment. University of Idaho is one of those, Colorado School of Mines, as well as Eastern Michigan University. So we are seeing a lot of activity and excited to be here and chat today.
Well, great. We're happy to have someone from the consulting side. And, I've been saying P3. I haven't, there may be some folks in our audience that are like, what are they talking about, P3? So that's public-private partnerships. And that's typically when a public university is partnering with a private firm to basically kind of, be it from a finance side or some other risk side, they want to, leverage that with a private developer or private operator. That's what we mean by P3. Now, I've got a question, and I was told there are no stupid questions, just stupid people who ask questions. So I'm going to be a stupid person here really quick and ask a question, because I was recently doing some work on a private university that has got a partnership with a developer. Am I supposed to call that private partnership, or what's the industry lingo for that?
I think we just said keep it P3. It'll cover it.
It does cover it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you're good there.
Well, guys, let me move to this next slide, and this came out of B&D's 2024 report, but it's basically looking back at the past 10 years through 2023. One thing about P3 is you're not looking on an annual basis of tracking deliveries. You're really tracking closings. And so this is the closings that have happened each year going back to 2014 through 2023 and the value amount. Of course, the main trend that we see here is there used to be a lot more projects that did not have very high value, on an average basis. And of course, we saw in 2020 a big slowdown. We saw some things come back up 2021 that got shelved for whatever happened in 2020 that caused us to slow down. And then for 2023 we actually saw 4 more deals than we saw in 2022. It'll probably end up being, this takes a little bit of time to, I guess, get all the information, but it'll probably be next fall before we know exactly how many closings occurred in 2024. But wanted to put it out to you guys. What's your educated guess on what we're going to see ending up with 2024 as far as deals closing and value? Anybody want to?
I can start. I'm not going to venture to guess a specific number, but I will say that I believe the number is going to be higher than what it was in 2023, just because there's been a lot of activity in the market that's picked up post-pandemic. And there's obviously a natural lag in when a project goes out to the market and when it closes, because it can take a year, sometimes 2 years to get through, a project selection of a developer, design, and then financial close. So my guess is it's going to be higher, and I think the deal values are going to be greater just because of what we've seen in the market with the types of projects coming out. You've got a lot of large flagships that are coming out with really big projects because there's either pent-up demand or they've got major enrollment growth that's requiring big numbers of beds, 1,000 plus. So that would be my guess, but I don't know if Jeremy or Jason want to venture a guess on a specific number. I'd love to see it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be more. I think if we thought about them off the top of our head, we probably could get to certainly more than 14. I'm going to guess it's going to, be pushing 20, if not slightly over from last year, for any number of reasons. Whether it be obviously we had a little bit of give on interest rates last year, but I think there's also some other headwinds that I'm sure we'll talk about during this conversation that just talk about the increase in volume.
Great.
Yeah, 20 at 100 million average, 2 billion is probably a good benchmark. We're going to have some big ones that we know have already closed. So yeah, I'll skew that and counter any the 50s and 60s. So in the right direction.
So that's rear view. Let's start looking out the windshield and kind of talk about what's ahead for the next 3 years. Should we anticipate 10 to 20 closings a year, or do you think we're going to see a surge, or does it sound like a dip from that last answer? But
yeah, I'm going to take the over, Wes. I think we're going to see more than 20 most years for the foreseeable future. I think there's a number of reasons. One, think about all the deals we just talked about: Utah, Rhode Island, Maryland grad deal, South Carolina, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Jack State, right? Where Jeremy and his team are working. App State even, right? Those are all either the first of many phases or the continuation of several phases. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is when we talk about a campus, we're not talking about one deal closing on that campus in any given year. I think we're talking about multiples over a period of time. So I think you can start to set a number from there. The second piece is just, when we talk about speed to market, one of the things that we've all gotten really good at on this side of it is getting deals closed. Jeremy, you guys announced that deal at University of Tennessee in May of 23, and you were closed in the first quarter last year. We announced a deal on the other side of the state in Memphis in December of 23. We were closed before the end of last summer. I just think we're all getting very good. We're not seeing these prolonged 18-month, 20-month pre-development periods. Schools are motivated to get moving. There's market acceptance of this as a way, P3 as a way to finance and execute and deliver. And so I think we're just seeing everything kind of move a little bit faster as well.
Yeah. The quality of the opportunities is getting better and better. You know, everyone's maturing, institutions and our great advisors and Lindsay and her group over there, you know, going in saying, here's the parameters, the thresholds and the guardrails are there, so we don't get too far out of bounds, because a lot of times when you got a 2-year closing period, it's pulling it back to you know, expectations, because expectations may have been off, and they may not have ever even gone down the P3 path if they had understood those expectations. But for sure, if they do, you know, it's you can move much more efficiently and effectively when expectations, and we understand the market, we understand what the rental rates need to be for the product type. There's no huge surprises except things that we see all together that we're like, you know, tariffs came up. We're all in it together. We all got to deal with it together. We couldn't build to the end, so now we do have to, but you got to move forward. So that's why I think too, it's helping that it's mainstream and you're getting a lot more project certainty. So it's all in the favor, I think, of P3s and them growing as we go forward.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see a dip unless there's another major economic blip, something that occurs. I mean, I think the forces are there driving this forward, and the need for P3s is going to continue to be there.
Well, so that goes into my next question and looking a little bit further down the road, but I do want to bring up, and this is probably impossible for anybody to see. Let me switch up here. So this is the key. This is from the Chronicle on a survey that they did of university administrations on basically, you know, across P3, not just on the housing side of it, but what were the areas of interest in partnering. This one was from, I believe this was the 2019, 39% is what they ranked then. And then let me, can go now to 2023. This was last year. That had dropped to 20%. And then this year, I can move this over a little bit. It's back up to 28%. So, yeah, it seems like there's certainly interest there from a housing standpoint. But anyway, getting back to the question I wanted to ask, what are some of the driving forces that will make P3s more attractive or even necessary for institutions, and call it 7 to 10 years out?
I can start. I kind of ended my last comment with that, but I think there's a few different things, right? You've got, number one, aging infrastructure that just continues to age, deferred maintenance backlogs that continue to grow. And, you know, P3s are a good way of potentially financing student housing and using debt capacity that a university has to invest in other assets that don't generate their own revenue stream, like academic buildings, for example. So I think as a financing resource, that's one reason. I think number two, you're continuing to see the shift in higher ed overall, where you've got these very large flagship institutions that are continuing to do better while some of the smaller schools are struggling. But those that are doing better, they don't have enough housing, and it's just continuing to increase as their enrollment grows. So demand is getting greater for new housing in addition to replacement of old assets. And then finally, there's always the notion of P3s are great for universities who are really interested in and believing in the value of private sector innovation, private sector discipline, to bring value to a project rather than just doing it on their own.
Yeah, I think we finally have made it to prime time, right? I mean, it's been a long road through the years, through the 2000s, and everything just to get to be a market sector, but now the flagships are adopting it. You've got good case studies out there. You've got an understanding by higher ed that they're not losing control. You get what the formula is, and you are absolutely at the table in the formula for the project. But essentially, you know, and it's tailored to your need. If you want to, tailor it to exactly what the rental rates that you can prove up for that product type and that you're going to get an investment grade by one of the rating agencies for, and completely kind of get it off the balance sheet and it carry itself, you can back into the number with your rental rates, and then we all have to come up with a formula of like what's in, what's out to hit it. Or you can get behind the asset some and have some level of commitment to it, which buys your cost of capital down and allows you to do a little more product, I guess, for the same rental rates. So I think it's just education and evolution of the product class.
Gotcha. Jason, you got anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, Wes, I would just very briefly just say, and then marry the two together, right? You've got all this deferred maintenance. Well, how do you transfer? What's one way to transfer maintenance risk, right? Through a P3. You've got significant demand and you need speed to market. One way to manage what I'm going to call process risk, right? Which that old phrase, a camel's a horse by a committee. And we know universities love committees, right? Is a P3. There's affordability risk and so there's affordability as a challenge, and there's some procurement risk that you can transfer to a partner to help to deliver less expensively. So I think if you look at what all the underlying sort of, not even underlying, but the headwinds are, and some of those challenges that Lindsay is helping her clients navigate, on the other side of it, we're willing to take a lot of that risk and willing to share in a lot of that risk with institutions. And again, I think the overarching sentiment of the conversation is, and there's just real acceptance both on the higher ed side as well as in the market sort of generally, that this is a tool to do that.
Gotcha. So I want to talk about trends for a little bit. Over certainly the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of the stuff that I've seen certainly delivered. There was, I guess, this desire, or whatever the reason was, for P3 developers, that were delivering or partnering with the university on the residential side of things, were being asked to do some other things, mix it in with dining services or some type of other auxiliary service. I think the William and Mary deal that I think that was Balfour. I know it. I think it had some infrastructure stuff that was included in it. Maybe it was more sustainability stuff. I can't remember exactly what it was, but my question on trends for you guys is does there continue to be a desire from the universities to have these kind of mixed use projects roll under the same P3 partner, or does that cause issues, and are they moving away from that?
I think there's a general trend to couple housing with other student-centric uses, whether it's, wellness type uses, whether it's dining because there's a need for additional capacity, whether it's retail to activate a space or activate the campus. There's definitely a desire to do that. Whether it always financially works and how it financially works is the question. And, I'd love to get Jeremy and Jason's thoughts on that. But I think a lot of times, it's adding cost to the project. And so if you're trying to keep rental rates low for students on their beds, you've got to figure out how to get that additional space in there to pay for itself. And a lot of times that comes with the university taking control of that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to Jeremy's earlier comments just about education. My perception is that institutions have gotten a little more realistic around what can or can't go in and how much or how little. And my perception is that institutions have gotten more realistic around what they have to fund. We talk about, deals have got dining halls and so forth in them. Almost all of the time, the institution is going to have to fund a full-blown dining hall. But for example, at University of Memphis, we built out and delivered a grab and, or are delivering a grab and go. That's a nice, less than 2,000 square feet way to put in something that helps their dining enterprise that doesn't have significant additional cost to the project, and that ultimately, the student rents can bear. If it was a 10,000 square foot dining hall, we might be having a different conversation, right?
Yeah.
We've done a lot of dining halls, a lot of parking decks, each with their own unique financing. A lot of times it gets in, you've got a project finance for the housing, and then you may have a master lease of that space, but it allows you to get it done. Fast track it. We take the delivery and the schedule, the delivery and the budget risk if they can keep up with the decisions and with their dining vendor or their, how they want to go about the retail and such. Maybe it's just white boxed or even cold dark shell we've done, but absolutely they're taking advantage of it. And I think with each one that's done, there's more credibility to it, more safety in others doing the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to hit really quick on financial vehicles that are being used. And because the past 2 cycles we've seen, over, and this is 23 and 22 that I'm talking about, over half of those were, or right at half of those, I should say, we're done with university credit versus, the typical taxes and bond financing that those that have been in the industry for more than a minute, we're kind of used to with P3. Let me pull up the question here. What kind of financing vehicles are your firms observing being used, and how creative are universities willing to be?
You had to get creative in 23 for those few deals to get done, I guess, or 22 and 23, with the interest spike. That's when we saw a lot of credit coming over into deals to get them across the finish line, right? Because the same cost of capital on a project finance level overnight needed almost a full backstop of a university to keep the same rate and same cost of capital, unless you wanted to increase rates or cut operating expenses to counter it. So I'm sure they want to continue to back off subsidizing it, but it's always a tool in the toolbox that I know we are all trying to stay abreast to make sure we know the latest terms and cost of capital for bonds as well as the equity.
Gotcha. Anybody else want to talk about that one? We've got we're at the top of the hour, so
I'll add a quick comment, which is that we are seeing a big range of different financing options, and it really depends on what the university's drivers are and what their constraints are. So everything from them financing it to 501c3 to private debt and equity, and even joint venture structures. So creativity is key. We've got headwinds still, obviously, with interest rates and construction costs being elevated. So everyone's got to get creative these days to make these deals as successful as possible.
Gotcha. I had one more question on design trends, but I'm gonna shelve that one. We've got a question from the audience. I wanted to help Joe out with this question here. Are all P3 new builds, or does that include brownfield acquisition? And are the closings you're asking about new build or acquisitions? Really both, as far as
primarily they're new builds on the closing numbers we're seeing. They're not closed though. You could still bring a deal to the table, and if it involved acquisition and renovation of that or something, if the numbers worked, it would not be precluded.
Gotcha.
Right. Like the William and Mary deal, for example, included the acquisition of 2 existing residence halls into that deal, right? Into a new build. And we're seeing a few of those as well.
Gotcha. How much is capital renewal driving some of these decisions? And, would we see some refinancing of maybe some things that were done, either on their books, on the institution's books or whatever, that, they want to bring a P3 partner in, maybe there is no new construction, but they just want to partner with someone on the private side to, I guess take it off their balance sheet or whatever. Is that something that, is that a driving force out there at all?
Have not seen a lot of it with housing. No, there's some deals that are renovation as opposed to new construction, but when you're getting into, university debt, there's defeasance issues with that existing debt. And so it can get complicated, but whereas you've seen that with some other assets, monetization type deals, it's not as prevalent with student housing.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, guys, I appreciate your time so much on helping our audience understand a little bit more about P3 and what the pipeline looks like and some of the new trends. We'll definitely have you guys back next year, and looking forward to seeing more announcements about everything that you guys are bringing to fruition over the next couple of years. So thanks again.
Thanks.
Thanks
Wes.
for
Thank you. Take care, Wes. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, guys, thanks for sticking on. I think we've got just over 40 folks that are still here. So, and we're almost 5 minutes past the hour. So, appreciate everyone sticking on for that. Next Shop Talk is March 13th, exactly 4 weeks from today. So, make sure that you go to shoptalk.info to get information about that and to register. Please, if you got anything from this, share it with your colleagues. Again, they can go to shoptalk.info and register there, and we'll make sure that they get the email invites each month. Again, guys, thanks so much. Appreciate it. To our audience, thanks for your questions and your comments, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Good to see y'all.